Hello and welcome to the Z31 front power brace with power brace support installation video. Today we're going to be going over what's included, pre-assembly if needed, and installation and torque specs. We already made a product overview video going over our QC, going over our color options, tolerancing, and all that in a previous video. If you're interested, go ahead and check out the link below. Otherwise, we're gonna go over the included right off the bat. You're gonna get a pair of the power braces. Now, we kind of loosely bolted this together, but you're gonna get a pair of the power braces, as well as the middle support bar. On the power braces hardware, you're gonna have 4 of these carriage bolts, 4 of the washers, and 4 of the nuts. Now, we went ahead and already pre-assembled the carriage bolts on there. You're gonna follow that up by a washer and a nut, and you're just gonna hand tighten that. That's really it. So we're gonna do that real quick. I'm gonna flip this around, and we're just gonna put a washer and a nut real loose on it, just like that. Now, you wanna always make sure that these carriage bolts, they have a square pattern that has to be, make sure it's put into there. It gives a nice clean finish like that. But otherwise, sometimes they can fall out in the installation, so make sure to get the square indent part of that when you go to actually install it on the car. Hardware pack should be fully gone and used. Now you're ready to go ahead and bolt this to the car. So what you're gonna need as far as tools is you're gonna be reusing the factory bolts where these go, unless you wanna buy a new one. So the sockets for that size. For these, you're gonna need a 9/16 wrench to be able to fit the nuts on the other side of this. That's really about it. The sockets to fit the factory bolts and the 9/16. Let's run this over to the car and get this installed. All right, so now that you got the factory power braces out, you're gonna wanna keep the bolts, like I said, unless you wanna use the new bolts. The socket size for these is 15 millimeters. The bolts that you're gonna be mounting these are these 2 and then these 3, and same thing for the other side. We have a pretty clear view here, so there's really not much to do besides bolt this on. All right, so now we're gonna just bolt this on. We're gonna toss a few bolts in. The back one here and one on the other side. So I just loosely installed the back 2 and the closest to the front of the car 1 bolt. The reason I didn't put these 2 on yet is because they're for the sway bar. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tighten up these 3 and then make the sway bar on. Put the sway bar on, I wanna make sure that the holes do have clearance. So if it helps, sometimes you can very loosely just put the bolts in just so they act as a guide, so you don't accidentally, when tightening, move the power brace so it covers up the holes. But that's all I'm gonna do right there and right there. Besides that, I'm gonna go ahead and not fully tighten, but we'll go over torques here in a second, but just tighten them up until they don't move anymore. Make sure that the power brace support in the middle is still loose, and the square heads are seated inside the support bar. So then when things move and get shifted around, you're not fighting to get that square head in there. See how easy that is? Now we have access to those bolts, and we can put the sway bar in without having to re-unbolt everything. So next I'm gonna do the other side. Great, so now that you got these guys and these 3 torqued, you can go ahead and install your sway bar. Now, the sway bar holes are these and these. We're not gonna do that just yet because we do have the front control arm that we still have to mount as part of this installation video series. But you can go ahead and install that. If you already got your front control arms, this is the perfect time for you to do that. But now we're just gonna go over torque specs because this project right here is pretty much wrapped up for you. Torque specs, you're gonna torque the carriage bolts to about 10 to 15 foot-pounds. Like I said, just make sure they're in the square. You can see how nice and flush they sit when they're in that square. And then you're gonna torque the power brace bolts and the ones for the sway bar to the factory spec. They should have that on the factory manual. Those are gonna be replacing the bolts. Unless you're buying new bolts, it depends what grade bolts you get. You might have to trim up or trim down, but generally you'd want to keep those within factory. that's really it. It took about 15 minutes with this previous stuff already removed and while videotaping this whole thing for the install. So it's a pretty easy install, and you have a nice brand new brace and with the bar that allows a lot of that inner frame rail support. You know, you don't have a little bit of frame rail shifting both up and down and in and out. This is just things to help add the strength and structural rigidity to the unibody chassis. The Z31 is pretty good, better than the 280ZX and the S30 in front of it, with still room for improvement, especially if you're gonna be doing some heavy driving or you know, more race spirited driving, if you will. But that pretty much sums up the installation video for this. You got everything. Hopefully this did a really good job of summarizing everything for the install. If you have any questions or concerns, give us a call or shoot us an email. Thanks.